Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful August the 7th, 2019. Grando Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, I feel like the late, great Mr. Rogers. What a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and wouldn't you like to be my neighbor?
I would like to be your neighbor, Big C, especially with all the barbecue ribs you must give away for free. I know that's why it's great to have that Southern comfort. Also, those what's it called? Pecan pies and peach gobblets. I know you give those out too, Big C. There's a lot of stuff going on in the sports universe. I was so touched yesterday by our show on fighting and how you want to fight for things. And as you got to believe in who you are, and you're worth fighting for. Everything's worth fighting for, and sometimes you got to fight for it. I'm turned on by boxers that get into the ring, and there's no way out unless you win or you get knocked out. And then baseball. A lot of people still going yard in the role of Major League Baseball. There's always talk of college football and NFL football. And then I have a high school football special for all you prepsters out there that follow Big C Sports. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. So Big C, when you said, won't you be my neighbor, do you have a lot of neighbors asking for free barbecue? Is that why, Big C, your thoughts?
But Charlton, it's great to live in a place where you know your neighbors, where you don't need an alarm system on your house. You got a good dog, and you got good neighbors to keep an eye on everything.
Now, I understand you Southern men, a good dog is one that is an alarm and home protector, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, he knows where he gets his bones from, Charlton, so he's not about to let somebody invade the premises and take his bones.
Well, I understand that, too. There's still more talk coming out of the White House about how they don't want to name anything white supremacy. It's funny because there's a thing in the court system, is it live or is it Memorex? And sometimes when you put people under oath, they change their tune. Well, sometimes POTUS has been caught on tape saying things that he's now speaking against, but we know he's reading. It's not his own words, Big C. What is it like when someone goes into court and they change everything, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I've witnessed the President Charlton on television reading the teleprompter, and it's almost like he's straining to recognize the words that are on there. He's like, I don't believe the words that are coming out of my mouth. Those are the people that are his followers, Charlton, because they're not words of sincerity. When you have to struggle to read something, as a president, you should be able to address this nation with words that are heartfelt from you. Not somebody putting on a teleprompter screen for you to read, and you're squinting and trying to get in every line, and I don't believe I'm saying that. And that's what I've recognized from the president, to lack empathy for American citizens because they don't have the same complexion as him. And I'm also appalled at the police department in Dayton, Ohio, trying to say that they don't feel that was racially motivated shooting, that they don't feel it was a hate crime, even though the majority of people that were shot were African American, and they were the major patronage of that establishment that the gunman went into. So to do that, and I understand that's one of the states that the president won when he won the presidency, and it's Republican run with the governor and the senators from Ohio also. And so they're reluctant to go against the president and the White House in those statements, Charlton. But these are American people. And when somebody commits a hate crime, domestic terrorism, when you go out with an assault weapon, that's domestic terrorism, Charlton. No simple other ways about it. It's domestic terrorism. And until the media calls it out, regardless of what a police chief says or what a governor says, the media has to call it out for what it is. They are the voice of the American people. When you think about the airways in America, those are freedom of speech, Charlton. They are funded by the government. They're funded by the taxpayers. Those are public airways. And so you need to represent the public when you're giving your spiel on the news at night.
And we all know that's true. We're in a nation of the law, And I've always been told by some great friends over the years that the dirt will come out in the wash. Under oath makes people come out with the dirt. Sometimes it changes colors, but it comes out. We still want to give our thoughts and prayers to everybody going through something. And I appreciate when people can fight. You got to fight for what you want. You got to fight for your right to party. You got to fight for your right to get an education. You got to fight for your family. Sometimes you have issues going on, and you got to tell people you love them, and you forgive them, and you care about them. And sometimes they'll listen, and hopefully they'll listen sooner as opposed to later. But I want to go back into something that you took me back yesterday, Big C, talking about fighting. And I grew up fighting also. I learned to box when I was a young boy at 8 years old. Also did some martial arts. I just understood how to get the fear out of you. I was taught by a guy by the name of Clarence. I won't say his last name. But he came out of a background of fighting also. And everybody knows the best fighters, they fight with their mind. They don't get in fights because they use their mind. But a guy that loves to get into the ring. And he will never, ever be of the stature of the guy that made him somewhat famous. And that's Joe Frazier. We talk about Frazier and Ali. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. The late Howard Cosell. But Frazier, 32 wins, 4 losses. You know he was a great boxer. And when only Muhammad Ali and George Foreman are the people that could beat this man. And you think about how he wasn't a big guy, Big C, but his losses came to some guys who were just iconic Hall of Fame figures. But Frazier terrorized other opponents, handing out 27 knockouts. Think about it. Of his 32 wins, 27 were knockouts. And the gold medalist in the 1964 Olympics. When you knock out 27 out of your 32, that's a bad man, Big C. Your thoughts?
Joe Frazier was a dominant force in the ring, and he rose to prominence during Muhammad Ali's exile. You think about it, he also won that gold medal in the Tokyo Olympics in 1964.
Yep.
That's the same Olympics that Bob Hayes, former Dallas Cowboy and NFL Hall of Famer, won the 100-meter dash and set a world record at that time, being touted the world's fastest human.
Yep.
But Joe Frazier was just a dominant force. He had such a left hook, Charlton, that he would lay on fighters, and 27 times that left hook connected and ended the fight for him. And you think about the prominence of his career, that the only 4 losses that he suffered were to heavyweight champions of the world, Charlton.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali and George Foreman.
Yeah, that's amazing. And another thing that I appreciate about Joe Frazier is he wasn't the biggest guy in the ring when he lost to Ali and lost to Foreman. And I really wish they would have stopped that fight against Foreman after the 3rd knockdown, but they let it happen 6 times. But the man kept fighting. He had the heart of a lion. And I know sometimes he and Ali had some terse words to say to each other. Ali later apologized about some of the mean-spirited things that he said. But I think it was about getting inside of your opponent's head. I don't think it was that hateful outside of the ring as it was inside. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, these men had a kinship with each other, Charlton, that was beyond the promotions of the fight. You got to understand, these were great tacticians mentally outside the ring in that era. This was something that the world had not seen, boxers being able to promote their own event. It would normally be done by the promoters. But Ali knew how to promote. Joe Frazier came along with him on that carousel, Charlton, and these two men took heavyweight boxing to a new height in the 70s.
Yeah, so congratulations. I mean, boxing, we talk about Curt Flood in baseball, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, they made boxing so relevant. Larry Holmes, 69 wins and 6 losses. Larry Holmes started his career on a hot streak. He won 48 consecutive fights, 1 win away from Rocky Marciano's record, and he held the championship for 7.5 years. But I think as much as he wanted to be like Ali, I think the toughest fight that Holmes ever had is when he had to fight Ali, and he was asking him to stop the fight. And in order to try to stop the fight, he had to try to get Ali to quit or knock him out. But he didn't want to hurt him, if that makes any sense. Big C, your thoughts on the great Larry Holmes?
Well, he grew up under the mentorship of Muhammad Ali. He was one of Muhammad Ali's sparring partners early on in his career, Charlton. And he got a chance to ascend to the height of being the heavyweight champion of the world and held that crown for 7 years, some epic fights. Along the way, he represented the heavyweight title the way it should be represented. And it hurt him emotionally when he had to fight Muhammad Ali. You always fight for money. Ali took the fight. He needed the money.
Yeah.
And Larry Holmes knew that this fight could not end in any kind of good way. he could not take the chance of losing to Muhammad Ali. But Muhammad Ali's skills were so tarnished at that time, I don't even know why the Boxing Commission let it go, other than just his name was Ali. But that fight should have been stopped halfway through the rounds that it was stopped in, Charlton. It was just a sad way to see the greatest go out like that. And Larry Holmes had no mantle that he wanted to put his belt on at that time after that fight.
You know, I think about the humanity in fighting, and we talk about MMA, especially now. How you were just saying, how MMA guys can grab you behind the head, they can knee you, they can do everything but elbow the back of the head. They can't punch the back of the head, but they can punch the side of it. And I hear some of the times the official will give the rules before they fight. I remember I met Stitch, one of the greatest cut men in the business, and just watching how he would glue guys back together with some kind of glue they put on people. Well, I think about Larry Holmes, and I think about the way he fought with graciousness, and his body type was not Evander Holyfield. In fact, Ali was not even Evander Holyfield. Now, if these were football players, or Big C, if they were baseball players, they would say something. But you look at how tight some of the boxers are to this day, or whether it's Holyfield, or Mayweather, or some of these other guys, I'm sure conditioning's changed. Has boxing been scrutinized the way baseball and football has when it comes to body type? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, during that era, everybody had the same body type, whether it's baseball, basketball, football. Weight rooms were not advantageous for athletes in those eras. If you look at football during that era, in the 60s and 70s, I mean, defensive and offensive linemen were 260, 270 pounds.
Yeah.
They're now 70 and 80 pounds more than that in this modern-day game. You know, weightlifting has become very pronounced in all professional sports. Baseball players live in the weight room. Golfers lift weights where they never did in the 50s
Tiger
and
Woods.
60s and 70s, Charlton. So
Yeah.
the evolution of professional sports has made better bodies out of all athletes.
It really has. Big C, Lennox Lewis, what a gentleman. 41 wins, 2 losses. Lewis has dual citizenship, British and Canadian citizenship, an Olympic gold medalist, represents Canada. Lewis also 3-time world heavyweight champion. At 6'5", he tormented his opponents, a lot bigger than guys like Mike Tyson, even bigger than guys like Holyfield, and of course, bigger than Joe Frazier. But as a dual citizenship, here's a man that's loved not only on his home country, but around the world. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, he was the most imposing physical figure in the heavyweight title ranks since George Foreman, when you looked at him standing at 6'5", and he was a gentleman boxer. You know, when you listen to him speak, he spoke so eloquently because he spoke the Queen's English out of England, Jonathan. But Lennox Lewis was a dominant giant in the ring, and he knocked out his opponents with gusto.
Yeah. Now, here's another guy, when you think about Archie Moore, and this is record number of wins with 23 losses. Here's another fighter from back in the day who had absolutely amazing, win-loss ratio. Many consider Archie Moore the most celebrated light heavyweight fighter of all time. And to have the number of wins that he had, people think it's a typo, but I know you followed many boxers for many, many moons. Could Archie Moore compete against today's fighters over the last decade? Big C, your thoughts?
Oh, yes, Charlton. He would have dominated. You think about a fighter who went out and had over 200 professional fights and asked if he could compete. Could a fighter of today's era compete with an Archie Moore? You think about the tenacity that he brought to the ring in over 200 professional fights, Charlton. It's now hard to get a fighter to fight 50 professional fights. He did 4 times that many and dominated with 186 victories. It'd be hard-pressed to find somebody in the middleweight class that compete with Archie Moore.
That's amazing when you think about that. And that's not including the sparring partners that he had. He must have had fists of steel. Another guy, Pernell Whitaker, 40 wins, 4 losses, 200 fights. When you think about Moore, 40 wins, 4 losses, not that impressive. But it was for Pernell Whitaker. Had quite a career. He was a 4-weight class champion, a world champion, and an Olympic gold medal champion in 1984. But when you just finished talking about Archie Moore, 186 wins, 23 losses, Pernell Whitaker, 40 wins, 4 losses. What a distraction, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's a huge contrast, and unfortunately, Pernell lost his life just a couple of weeks ago in a roadside accident back in his hometown. And, but Sweet Pea was a great champion, Charlton, when he had the opportunity. When you think about the era of boxing now, boxers in the old days were like MMA fighters. You had to fight to survive. You had to fight to feed your family. Now they have paydays that will support you for an entire year or more.
They will do that, and just appreciate anyone that gets in the ring. It's just you and your opponent. Doesn't matter what somebody thinks about. It's you and your opponent. And one of the guys, when you think about Archie Moore and how many fights he had, you still think of the name Mike Tyson. 50 wins, 6 losses, maybe the most feared guy in boxing, but he was no Archie Moore. Tyson's game was very intimidating, probably one of the most of all time. Tyson had knockout power in both fists. He was the youngest boxer to ever win the heavyweight title at age 20. And we talk about great fighters in MMA and martial arts and boxing, but the greatest showman before you got into the ring, here's a guy that made you think you already lost before you climbed the ring. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, there's been 2 fighters in my lifetime that I've had a chance to witness that I thought that nobody could ever beat them. First was George Foreman. After he beat Joe Frazier, I said, this man's invincible. I was in fear of Muhammad Ali's life after George Foreman had beat Joe Frazier. Then when Mike Tyson came along, this was something that no man had seen ever in modern time boxing. Somebody who intimidated even the referee when he walked in the ring. The referee, after he said, broke, he jumped back to the corner. He made sure he was out of the way. Because Mike Tyson walked in the ring and said, which one the referee? Because I'm knocking the other one out. That was as simple as Mike was. And he did that with gusto, Charlton. Mike Tyson, before he got into legal problems, Charlton, he was the most devastating fighter that any of us has ever seen.
I want to get your thoughts on Mike, though. Because Mike came along after Ali and after Holyfield, after Holmes. And when Iron Mike came on, I remember that fight that he had against the gentleman, the 2 brothers. And he had the fight where he knocked him down, I think it's about 90 seconds, Spinks. And when Spinks got into the ring, Spinks was already a defeated man. And the difference between Holyfield beating him twice, Holyfield knew how to box. And I wonder how Tyson would have been had he fought more guys like Holyfield and Ali and Larry Holmes, as opposed to guys like Michael Spinks. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, if Tyson had fought Holyfield at the time that he fought Spinks, he would have knocked Holyfield out also at that time, Jonathan. Tyson, at that time, his life was on focus as far as boxing. He was with Customato. His life had changed. He was with Don King. He had distractions in his life when he fought Holyfield. He had come from incarceration. He was no longer Iron Mike. He was no longer that intimidating force. But in the first 5 years of Mike Tyson's boxing career, Charlton, I don't care who you lined up in the ring, he was going to destroy. He destroyed Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes, he hit Larry Holmes and knocked him out 3 times, and he still got up. Larry Holmes could not. His equilibrium was totally gone.
He was off.
Mike Tyson was just devastating. So when I look at fighters of eras, it's about time matchup when you're fighting. Just like with Ali, when he fought Larry Holmes late in his career, he was not a match for Larry Holmes because all of his skills were diminished at that time. If he had fought Larry Holmes 10 years earlier, it would have been a different fight. The same with Holyfield and Mike Tyson. If Mike Tyson had fought Evander Holyfield in the first 3 years of his career, Evander Holyfield would have went to sleep within 2 rounds.
Well, that would have been great to see. And I still have great respect for what Tyson went through, a guy that was clearly ripped off by too many people. Manny Pacquiao. Think about Pacquiao. 61 wins, 7 losses, the Filipino boxer. He seamlessly does it all. Not only is he one of the best fighters of all time to ever step into the ring, he's also been sent to Congress by his country and is 11-time world champion in 8 divisions. Beat up a young man and showed him that grown man's strength is real. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, we just saw Manny Pacquiao in the ring just a short couple of weeks ago, capturing another title, Charlton. Manny Pacquiao has been the consummate fighter. He has taken on all challenges, been in some of the most controversial fight decisions of the modern era that we've witnessed in the last decade. But Manny Pacquiao has not had any quit in his heart ever, Charlton. He an early exit against Mayweather on a shoulder injury, Charlton. But when I look at Manny Pacquiao, he's the guy that I wanted in an alley with me when a fight breaks out.
Yeah, especially he's a congressman. He can get people in trouble too, Big C. Ricardo Lopez, 51 wins, 0 losses. Lopez was technically a sound fighter who pursued his opponents with a deceptive power. At his weight class, he was the best straightweight champion of all time and he handled titles with 2 different weight classes. Someone that's not a household name, but when you go 51-0, and still people look at Floyd Money Mayweather having one of his wins against a guy who's an MMA fighter, Ricardo Lopez is the real deal, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about the marketing of fighters. Everybody wanted to use the benchmark of Rocky Marciano 49-0, and here it is. You're talking about Ricardo being 51-0 and a title holder in 2 different weight divisions, dominating the flyweight division in his career. And here's Mayweather, same record as Ricardo.
Yeah.
But Ricardo didn't make as much money in one fight, in his entire career as Mayweather has made in one fight.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's timing. You talked about it before. We talked about Curt Flood. Curt Flood doesn't make the kind of money that players make now, and he's the reason they make that money. It's just amazing. It's timing, Big C. Roy Jones Jr., 66 wins, 9 losses. Now, Jones was one of the greatest fighters that boxing has ever known. And he had the pleasure of witnessing in his prime. He was a superstar who had little competition, and he was named the 1990s Fighter of the Decade. A lot of people wouldn't think that, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, he was Roy Jones, and you talk about a tactician in the ring. He just tormented the fighters that he faced, Charlton. And to be Fighter of the Decade, that meant that you fought everybody and you fought often, but you dominated your opponents. Roy Jones was that individual. I had the pleasure of watching him down in the Staples Center fight down there, and Roy Jones puts on a show every time he went into the ring.
Yeah, it's amazing how many fighters have made a name in the ring, but maybe did not make as much of a name outside of it. Roberto Duran. I remember the No Mas fight. I was so afraid that he would beat Sugar Ray Leonard, and he did in the first fight. Second fight, it was no mas. I think prop betting was well known back then too. Said he had some bad steak. He didn't go to one of your restaurants, so you were too young at the time, but he had some stomach cramps. But Roberto Duran, 103 wins, 16 losses, and think about how dominant this guy was. He was nicknamed Hands of Stone, thanks to his tremendous punching power, and he was a perfect brawler and a great skill set, like an MMA guy that could box. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the most notable thing about that, when you talk about a guy having over 100 professional fights in his career, this means that this guy is about the business of fighting, Charlton.
That
they're taking on all comers. Roberto Duran's, as you say, the Hands of Stone. He had knockout power in both hands, but he ducked nobody during his professional career. I was at that fight in '79 in Montreal, Charlton, when he fought Sugar Ray Leonard for the first time. And 75,000 people were in the Olympic Stadium there on that hot, sweaty night, and it was humid. I was sweating as bad as the boxers were. But he was a great man to watch fighting in the ring.
Talk about African American history. We talk about fighting. We've been doing shows about fighting. Just like in court, you got to fight for what you believe in. You got to fight for what's right, and the dirt comes out in the wash. And I respect so much men and women who go through something, not born with a silver spoon in their mouth, but they fight anyway. Jack Johnson, 73 wins, 13 losses. The great Jack Johnson is an American sporting pioneer, and his impact cannot be diminished. He's the first African American to secure the heavyweight title back in 1908, when they were still in fear of lynching. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Jack Johnson, to me, is the greatest African-American athlete of all time. People will talk about Jordan. People will talk about Ali. They will talk about others. But nobody could go through the fortitude of what Jack Johnson did, that you're in fear of your life every day. You're beating up white men. You're dating white women in a time when they kill black people just for being on the wrong side of the street with white people. Jack Johnson was the most devastating man to ever walk the face of the earth in modern times, Charlton, since the 1900s. I will always think about him as an iconic American figure.
Well, amazing. I respect so many people who come from the opposite side of what we call privilege. All life came from Africa. And these men knew that because they read, even though society wanted to say they were not smart. All life came from the African continent. But we've been treated like crap in this country for most parts. But we fought to change the law. We fought to change the law. And he was a great fighter. Sam Langford, 180 wins, 29 losses. Sam Langford is held as the greatest fighter nobody knows. Big C, he was only 5'7", simply an exceptional presence in the ring. Not only did he handle his light heavyweight bouts, but he also took out heavyweights during his time. At 5'7", smaller than Mike Tyson, but hit like Tyson. Your thoughts?
And that's what Sam Langford was, Charlton. And these are the things that astonish me when we talk about the careers of boxers.
Yeah.
And you talk about guys having 50 fights, 60 fights, maybe 70 fights. We're looking at Langford. Here's another fighter, Charlton, that fought over 200 times professionally in the ring.
Yeah.
And so we don't understand the devastation that these men went through mentally and physically. There's constantly talk now in professional sports about CTE. Think about these fights, Charlton. All these fights were 15-round regulated fights.
Yeah.
Some of them went even longer. And, they did not break and have the gentleman's stature that they have in today's era. So to have a man that wins 180 fights, Charlton, as a champion is a true champion.
And think about that, Big C. Champions are born and they're created. These are guys that did not have the Donald Trump's, what they call silver spoon in their mouth, or from what I understand, golden spoon, if you can understand that, Big C. Henry Armstrong, 151 wins, 21 losses. What can you say about Hank? Besides the fact that he was an incredible boxer, Henry Armstrong stood at 5'5" and still managed to knock out 101 of his 151 fighters. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, you talked about two diminutive boxers back-to-back, 5'7" and 5'5". And you think about a boxer being 5'5". You don't have a reach advantage over anybody that you get in the ring with.
No.
But you're able to knock out 101 of your opponents, Charlton. So when you think about Henry Armstrong being a dominant black fighter, in the time that Joe Louis dominated the heavyweight ranks, Henry Armstrong dominated the lighter ranks, Charlton.
Yeah, and when you think about that, all these guys fought, Big C. They didn't have the kind of money that Floyd Money Mayweather has, and he's gone on to do some great things. But with the guys 50-0, they're still talking about, do I need another fight? Well, at 50-0, you're not even halfway there, Big C, with what some of the other great fighters did back in the day. But Floyd Money Mayweather, 50 wins, no losses. Mayweather's always quicker and smarter than his opponents, especially at the bank. But that's the reason he's been undefeated. He's held 5 titles in 5 weight divisions. Maybe the smartest boxer in the history of the universe. Big C, your thoughts?
The smartest fighter businessman in the history of boxing, Charlton, because he promotes himself, he negotiates his own deals. And he has kept himself safe in and out of the ring, Charlton. Nobody's hit him in the ring. Nobody's been able to catch up with him outside the ring. Big
C. Rocky Marciano. Now we're going way back in the day for some mainstream fighters. Marciano's 49-0. He has the benchmark for all heavyweight fighters. He retired undefeated, 43 knockouts in those 49 victories. But some of those fights were against guys who they had to hold up in the ring just to get them in. Big C, your thoughts on the great Marciano?
Well, I think about the time when Marciano was racking up his championships, Charlton, and he was defeating some of the top black boxers of those eras.
Yeah.
I remember he fought Ezra Charles. Ezra Charles was 53 years old.
Yeah.
And he went 14 rounds with Rocky Marciano. So as great as Rocky Marciano was, there also is an asterisk by his record. He fought a lot of senior citizens in the ring.
and he had a hard time beating some of those, but you know how boxing was back then. Sugar Ray Leonard. I think you were sitting in one of his seats one time, Big C, and he asked if you would step aside, and you guys shook hands and had a libation. That's what the rumor is, Big C. I don't really know what happened. But Sugar Ray Leonard, 36 wins, 3 losses. Sugar Ray won the gold medal in 1976. He was named Boxer of the Decade in the 1980s. And the first fighter to earn more than $100 million, Big C, in his purses. Your thoughts?
Well, Sugar Ray Leonard was a media darling, Charlton. He won a gold medal at the Olympics. He went on to be a great promoter of himself and a promoter after he got out of the ring. Sugar Ray Leonard was the first fighter, Charlton, to earn over $100 million.
Yeah.
In the ring.
Yeah.
But he paved the way for fighters like Floyd Money Mayweather.
Yeah.
Once you learn how to promote yourself and become a spokesperson, Charlton, not just in the ring, not just because of boxing, but get into mainstream society, and Sugar Ray Leonard did that and paved the way for many great boxers to come.
Big C, if you could give me 4 more rounds. 4 more rounds, Big C. I need 4 more rounds out here before the Big C pause. Thomas Hitman Hearns, 61 wins, 5 losses. He won 6 titles in 5 different weight classes. He was head-to-head with Marvin Hagler and is still considered one of the top 3 fighters of all time, your thought, Big C?
Well, that epic fight that he had against Marvin Hagler was a signifier. But I go back to how Marvin Hagler knocked out Thomas Hearns,
yeah.
the Hitman.
Yeah.
Thomas Hearns had one of the most devastating knockouts I'd ever seen in my life. He had a fight against an undefeated middleweight fighter named Pipino Cuevas.
Yep.
He hit Pipino Cuevas, and it sounded like a board slapping up against a wall when he hit himself.
Yeah.
And the man fell straight down on his face. But
yeah.
He had two epic battles also with Sugar Ray Leonard, Charlton. One ended in a controversial draw that he should have just dominated that fight. But, you know, Thomas Hearns was a legend in Detroit. He was part of that Motown history of entertainers, whether it was in boxing, whether it was in football, whether it was in basketball, whether it was baseball, whether it was singing. Thomas Hearns is a Hall of Famer in Detroit lore.
I need 3 more rounds, Big C. This is when fighters dig down. They used to fight until someone won. Then they went to 15. Now they go to 12. I need 3 more rounds, Big C. The great Joe Louis, 66 wins, 3 losses. And when you say Joe was virtually unstoppable in the ring, that was true. After he obtained the heavyweight title in 1937, would you believe he successfully went on to defend the title 26 times? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, we talk about Joe Louis, Charlton, and the Brown Bomber was, you know, considered the greatest fighter of all time in the heavyweight ranks during his time. But we also talked about somebody yesterday, Charlton, who had came back from the Korean War and played for the Boston Red Sox. And when people think about athletes contributing their time to the war cause of America, Joe Louis did the same thing, Charlton. He went into World War II. He fought for America. He served. Not like our president.
Right.
He served.
Yeah.
And so Joe Louis was a hero in and outside the ring. And you talk about the number of times that he defended his heavyweight title, Charlton.
Amazing.
No heavyweight has defended the title as much as Joe Louis did.
26 times, Big C. But coming up on the final 2 rounds. We're going to come to the final 2 rounds before the Big C pause, and I know you got to run. But Sugar Ray Robinson, 173 wins, 19 losses, was like no other fighter. Sugar Ray Robinson, when he was in his prime, Robinson would outlast his foes and become the unrivaled boxer. This is a man that had so much stamina. 173 wins, only 19 losses. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about Sugar Ray Robinson. He was the latter-day Floyd Money Mayweather, Charlton. He has the movement. He had the speed. He had the charisma in and outside the ring. That was the way he dominated his opponents, Charlton. He was not a man to stand there and take a punch.
Right.
He was so slick in the ring. And matter of fact, Muhammad Ali modeled his boxing style after the great Sugar Ray Robinson.
That's amazing. And before we come up on the final round of Big C's classic throwbacks of the greatest fighters in the universe, I really appreciate the knowledge that you have. And I want to say, before we bring up the last fighter, before the Big C pause, this is a beautiful Wednesday. It's about the dirt coming out in the wash. It's about knowing your history, where you came from. And for everybody going through something, if you're fighting, you have a chance. You can fight politically. You can fight legally. You can fight by not giving up. You can fight for your family. You can fight for your health. You can fight for the rights to be an American. You can fight for the right to vote. And our greatest fighter is someone who did it in the ring, but he also did it outside of the ring. Big C, Muhammad Ali, 56 wins, 5 losses. Who else could float like a butterfly and sting like a bee? Who called themselves the greatest before they even knew Muhammad Ali? And still the first to secure the heavyweight titles 3 times in a row before he even went on to become a pro. In the 1960 Olympic gold medal, the man went to jail for principle, not because he committed a crime. He kept fighting, Big C. Our whole show is about fighting. Everybody in the universe, no matter what you're going through, when you fight, you have a chance. And you don't have to always put your hands on somebody to fight. Big C, what does Muhammad Ali mean to you? Your thoughts?
Muhammad Ali personified the history of his ancestors in America, Charlton. That you had to fight for everything that you achieved in this country, Charlton. That nothing was given to you, nothing was easy. And that was the road that he took to pass us, Charlton. To be the most recognizable figure in the world and to put that aside to fight for others.
Yep.
That's what Muhammad Ali did. He said, yes, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world, but that's just one individual. If I put who I am out there and I fight for the rights of others, Charlton, that makes me a greater individual that I can live with emotionally. That's what Muhammad Ali did. when you talk about making ultimate sacrifice, he put his career on the line to help the preservation of African Americans, Charlton, in this country.
Yeah.
Because he was one of them, and he wanted to stand with them. Not because he was greater than them, but because he was one of them. And that's what Muhammad Ali stood for. That's what people don't recognize with Muhammad Ali. He will always be recognized as the greatest in the ring, but you have to think about the greatness that he exuded outside the ring in the representation of his own people, Charlton.
Well, we've gone through so many things about fighting the last couple of days. I know you got to run, Big C, but I just want to say to everyone, the reason you got to fight is because it's your life. You got to make it what you want it to be. Big C Sports, you can hear us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on the #1 podcast network in the universe, an iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. You can follow Big C Sports on YouTube. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast television, and most people have a television. But what I really love is the app called Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear Welcome to the Show. I'll introduce Big C, and he'll do his thing. And I really want to thank all of our sponsors for their support. We're going to come up on the Big C pause. I know you got to run, Big C, but I'll come back and I'll talk to you about some college football. For all you preppers out there, follow Big C Sports when you want to know what's going on in the sports universe for high school football. We'll see you after the break. All right, we are back on Big C Sports after what's called the Big C pause. And Big C Sports really appreciate where we're going. As we mentioned before, you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, an iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. You can follow Big C Sports on YouTube. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast if you have a TV set, and most people do. You can also follow on the app that I love called Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear Welcome to the Show. I'll introduce Big C, and he'll do his thing. So he just gave us a on boxing. And some of the people who love boxing, obviously you think about Muhammad Ali, but there's Archie Moore, 186 wins, 23 losses. The great Jack Johnson, 73 wins, 13 losses. Rocky Marciano was 49-0. And then you think about Thomas Hitman Hearns, 61-5. Joe Louis, 66-3. The great Sugar Ray Robinson, 173 wins, 19 losses. And none other than the GOAT, Muhammad Ali, 56-5. Actually 56-5. But he also fought the government. So I'm going to give him 57 wins because he fought for freedom and he fought for a lot of people. But we love, it's all fair in love and war. You got to fight for what you believe in. I want to just touch on also some of the things going on in sports. NFL camps are hot all over the country, and really looking forward to kickoff for the NFL. Just had the Hall of Fame game. But on this beautiful Wednesday, there's a lot of baseball on tap, and especially seeing how everybody's chasing the playoff spot. And you're seeing it happen right before your very eyes on this beautiful Wednesday, August the 7th. You have Miami at New York, and Yamamoto's pitching against Mets. And that should be a nice pitching duel. Chicago White Sox at Detroit. Texas is at Cleveland. Toronto at Tampa Bay. Atlanta is at Minnesota. You have Fried versus Perez on the mound there. Colorado at Houston. And you have Garrett Cole versus Peter Lambert. I know that Cole being on that pitching, that cycle they have, this great triangle pitching down in Houston, led by Verlander. And Scherzer just gives them an upper hand, I think, on anyone. We'll see how far Houston can ride that good fortune they've had so far. And then Oakland A's at Chicago. They're playing a great series over in the Windy City. St. Louis Cardinals at the Los Angeles Dodgers. You have May going against Flaherty, and I love the way the Dodgers are playing. You have Washington at San Francisco. Anderson versus Ross. The Giants are still pushing. They're holding on to that playoff spot, that wild card spot. It's in range, but they have to finish strong, especially at home. San Diego at Seattle. Milwaukee at Pittsburgh. You have the New York Yankees at Baltimore. And what can you say about the Yankees? This is a team that's hot and cold at times, but I like the way they can win any series because they have the batting power to do it. Kansas City Royals at Boston, Philadelphia at Arizona. And so there's a lot going on in the world of the baseball universe. Love bringing it to you with Big C Sports. Also, I know a lot of people have on the mind what's going on in the world of college football. Who has the best team, depending on what preseason poll comes out. And everybody wants to say, if you look at the power rankings throughout the country, Clemson, the defending national champion, they're the team that a lot of people are picking to win another national championship under Dabo Swinney. I don't know if Clemson's going to do it. I don't see them being a repeat champion. They never have been. It would be the first time under Dabo Swinney and also Clemson if they pull off a national championship repeat. So I don't know if it's going to happen for them. You also look at Alabama. They're ranked number 2 by many people in the preseason poll. And when you have Nick Saban, they're always going to be in the top 3 or 4, it seems. Georgia was humbled last year by Texas in the bowl game. They were arguing that they should have been in the national championship game. Didn't happen last year. When you look at the history of Georgia football, I really love the fact that they are probably the most braggadocious team that cannot knock off Georgia. They can't knock off LSU, and they cannot knock off Alabama. They cannot knock off Auburn because all of those programs have won national championships over the last 15 years. You look at Oklahoma, a team that's always ranked in the top 5, it seems. They start this season number 4, and we'll see how far they can go with Hurts. Ohio State ranked number 5 preseason. I do believe Ohio State will be a better team this year than they were last year, just because they open up the offense more. You look at number 6, Michigan. You know, Bo Schembechler's not there, but he was always a coach that had the Wolverines in the top 10. And now you have Harbaugh and the Wolverine stripes on the helmet. This is a team that everyone's saying, if Harbaugh can't win it now, will he ever get it done? They still got to beat Ohio State. No matter who's coming and going, that's still the team that they have to reckon with. Number 7, LSU. They'll have their hands full with Miami to start the season. But LSU is prime on the Orgeron. Looking forward to them having another great run down in the SEC. Notre Dame, they're going to venture into SEC territory when they take on number 3, Georgia. I know Kelly has a great quarterback in Ian Book, but can they throw the book at Georgia and get a win? Georgia came up to Notre Dame a couple of seasons ago and escaped with a narrow victory. And we'll see if Michigan, not Michigan, but Notre Dame can go down south and do the same. If you've heard of Southern cooking, I don't think Notre Dame goes down there and gets a win. Remember when they went to Miami a couple of seasons ago? They were undefeated. They got beat 40-7. There's something about the Southern humidity and the Southern hospitality, if you believe in that. But humidity tends to play a factor when northern schools go down south. Number 9, Florida. The Gators are really back on top. I remember that great team they had led by the 2-time national championships they played in. And you think about how dominant they were under their coaching and the great players that have come through Florida. Tim Tebow's one that comes to mind. But they've always been led by their defense. Georgia is a top team, but I think Florida might knock them off this year. That's just my own feeling. I think if you look at how they have the better talent down in Florida, they're looking up. So the pressure's not on them. I do believe they're going to compete with Alabama for the SEC title. I don't think it's going to be Georgia, but we'll see what happens. And then the team that I think has really made a meteoric rise, and that's number 10, Texas. Talk about athletes. Texas has them. This is not the team that Vince Young led when they came into the Coliseum, and actually the Rose Bowl and knocked off USC. But they have a team that has a lot of confidence after knocking off Georgia last year when no one gave them the opportunity. No one gave them any hope. But I really like the way Ellinger is highlighting that offense. I think Texas has a defensive line that's as good as anyone in the United States. But until they win a big game, and that's in a bowl game again, if they get to the BCS Final Four, I think Texas has a team that can do it. But can they avoid the upset bug of playing a team like Oklahoma and even West Virginia that can come up and bite people? We'll see what happens with them. My choice to win the Pac-12, and I would be surprised if they don't, and that's the Oregon Ducks. I know Herbert is their All-American quarterback. They had 9 wins last year, but he was injured through a lot of those wins. So people knocked them for not being a team that could get 10 wins. like they could under the days of Brian Kelly, and they were actually playing for a national championship. They played and lost once to Auburn, and they also were there again, and they lost a game to Ohio State. So I think Oregon makes a big run this year. Number 12, Texas A&M. Here's a team, and Kyle Station is just a great place, Kyle Field, 100,000 plus that stand for most of the whole game. So we'll see what happens with Texas A&M playing in the SEC. I would love to see Texas go back and play in the Big 12. They're that part of the region of the country. In Utah, surprisingly, at number 13, out of the West Coast, we'll see if they make a climb back to the Pac-12 championship game. I look at Washington under Coach Chris Peterson. That's a team that's played in the Final Four under Peterson, and they've been the most successful Pac-12 program over the last 4 years. And I look at Washington having another 10-win season. Number 15, Penn State, out of Happy Valley. Will they be happy this year? If they want to be really happy, they got to knock off Ohio State, and they got to knock off Michigan. I don't think they can get both of them, but they may get one. Number 16, Auburn. Auburn, what can you say about Auburn? If Auburn can knock off Oregon, opening the season down south, then that will elevate them in the SEC. It would be horrible for the Pac-12 to lose that game. I know both teams are ranked. I still think Oregon has more team speed this year, and Oregon may just match them at the line of scrimmage. I think Washington had Auburn beaten last year. There was a bad pick call against the Huskies that cost them that game, but that's the SEC cooking, and you got to always keep that in mind if you go down south and play those teams. You look at University of Central Florida. They're playing Stanford. It's an early game for Stanford, but I would see Stanford having the offensive line to pull an upset down in the humidity and the heat in the south. It's earlier in the year, and so it might be a little bit warm. But if anyone can do it from the West Coast going south, and that would be Stanford. I look at Iowa. The Hawkeyes will always have a strong running game. The big corn-fed team, and I think their crowd's one of the best in college football. They do a lot to celebrate with the kids that are stricken with illnesses up in the hospital right next to their stadium. So you got to just give a lot of class and a praise to a program like Iowa. Number 19, Nebraska. They're back in the saddle again. No, they're not Tom Osborne, but this is a team that should be loaded at least to compete for a position in the Big Ten title game. I look at number 20, Stanford under David Shaw, and I will never count Stanford out. I know people are looking at Oregon. They're looking at Washington in the Pac-12, but David Shaw has had as many successful seasons as a head coach in the Pac-12 as anyone, going back to Pete Carroll, even at USC. You look at number 21, Syracuse. Syracuse out of the Northeast. They're still in the ACC. They're going to come behind Clemson, and no matter what Syracuse will do, they won't beat Clemson, so they're not going to compete for a championship. I look at Wisconsin out of the Big Ten, a team that can run the ball as well as anyone in the country, and they are an upset team, especially when you get them at Camp Randall. They can knock off anyone there. Army, you just got to lay your hats off, take your hats off to anyone that fights for the country and plays sports too. I love seeing Army, but to compete against teams that don't have the stress and the academic stress that they have to go through, I really just congratulate Army for being even in the top 25. Number 24, Michigan State. Again, they're not going to beat Penn State. They're not going to beat Ohio State. They're not going to beat Michigan, but they could pull an upset. It happened before on a bad field goal or a bad punt with Michigan. And then number 25, Iowa State. Iowa State, no matter how successful they are, they're still up against Oklahoma and they're up against Texas. So they'll have and then you got to look at Oklahoma State also. So that's a tough conference for them. But being ranked in the top 25, I know one of the coaches that used to coach not soccer, but wrestling at Iowa State, and they have a program that's kind of in the nowhere land. But Iowa's a small state, but they'll do great having success in their conference. What I want to do is Big C Sports is obviously I'm very happy with the progress that we're making with our podcast, and I also want to pay homage to a lot of the high school programs in the country. I know a lot of times people look at high school programs and they think, well, these are just young kids, and oftentimes what they're doing now is you'll see kids that are on television that you didn't see many moons ago. But because of the prominence of high school football, a lot of teams get a chance to showcase their talents, and I really want to just pay homage to the high school programs around the country. Number one ranked, modern day preseason ranked number one in high school football, whether you're looking at Max Preps or you're looking at Cal High Sports. There's also Big C Sports ranking high school football programs as well. And I want to just say congratulations to Coach Bruce Wallison with the Modern Day Monarchs, the last 2 defending national champions. And they start off the season preseason ranked number 1 out of Southern California in the Trinity League. And I still think California has the best high school football program in the country. Number 2, St. Francis Academy out of Baltimore, Maryland. They'll come up number 2. But I want to just finish off one more thing. I'd be remiss if I did not mention head coach Bruce Wallison. 2018, they were 13-2. And depending on what poll, they were ranked number 1 and 2 in the country. They beat De La Salle 35-21 to win the CIF Open Division Championship, which is California Interscholastic Federation Championship. So Modern Day's been doing it right, and they've been doing it for a long time with Bruce Wallison. Number 2, St. Francis Academy out of Baltimore, Maryland. Head coach is Henry Russell. In 2018, they were 10-0. They finished ranked number 6 nationally, and the Panthers outscored their opposition by 477-32, entering 2019 on a 23-game winning streak. And that's a program in the Maryland area that a lot of teams just don't want to play, so they got to go outside of the area to get games. Number 3, St. John Bosco, Bellflower, California, head coached by Jason Negro, and they're in the same league, the Trinity League, as Modern Day of Santa Ana. 2013, they were preseason ranked number 1 by a lot of people. They're one of the teams that gave Modern Day a loss, but Modern Day avenged it later in the playoffs and won the state championship and national championship. They were 13-3 last year, number 3 national ranking. They lost 17-13 to Modern Day in the CIF Southern Section Division I championship game. And if you love Southern California football, I was talking to my friend Mark Tennis at Cal High Sports. He's not really happy with the way a lot of these super teams are built. It's like a lot of the private schools can recruit throughout the land, and they land the best players, but that's just part of the scene in high school football. And number 4, North Shore High School, Houston, Texas, head coached by John Kay. In 2018, they were 16-0. Number 1 national ranking, they beat Duncanville 41-36 on a Hail Mary pass in the 6A Division I state championships down in Texas. And football is big in Texas. A lot of people in the Lone Star State think they're the number 1 team in the country. But you got to look at California programs going in there beating up some of the Texas programs. I still think the best football is played in California. Also, number 5, St. John's, Washington, D.C. The head coach is Joe Casmerto. He's 9-1 in 2018. They finished ranked number 13 in the national rankings. They lost 24-14 to Gonzaga in the WCAC semifinals in the Washington, D.C. area. They're loaded this year. Number 6, IMG Academy out of Bradenton, Florida. Head coached by Kevin Wright. They were 7-1 in 2018. A lot of people just won't play them. In fact, their lone loss last year came at the hands of Modern Day in Southern California. They lost 28-21. That game was in Southern California, and they finished ranked number 5 in the nation. Modern Day snapped IMG Academy's 40-game winning streak, and that's a school in Florida that gets some of the best players from the state of Florida and even other states. And so for California's best to knock off Florida's best and snap their 40-game win streak, and Modern Day lost in league to St. John Bosco. So I just think California has better football, but everyone has their opinion. Number 7, Duncanville, Texas. Head coach is Reginald Samples. They were 14-1 in 2008. They finished number 4 in the national rankings. They lost to North Shore in the 6A Division I championship. Number 8, St. Joseph Prep out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Head coach is Tim Roken. They were 13-0 last year. They finished number 11 in the national rankings. They beat Harrisburg 40-20 in the Class 6A state championship finals in Pennsylvania. Number 9, Central High School of Miami, Florida. They are loaded. They are coached by Roland Smith. They were 11-3 in 2018. The number 20 national ranking went to them. They lost to Northwestern 19-15 in the Class 6A semifinals down in Florida. So a lot of great programs come out of the state of Florida, and you'll hear many of their state's top programs ranked in the top 20 in the country. Number 10, St. Thomas Aquinas out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, head coached by Roger Harriet. They were 13-2 last year. They lost to Lakeland 33-20 in the Class 7A state championship. What I really appreciate about St. Thomas Aquinas, they will start the season in California. They will play De La Salle of Concord, California. which has won 28 North Coast Section championships in a row in the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area. So no matter who wins that game, you think about the winningest high school football streak in the country was set by Concord de La Salle from 1991 up until 2004. They started their streak in 1992 with a win over Merced, the defending state champion, and that was 35-21. And they went on, actually 34-14, and they went on to win 151 games in a row. That streak was snapped by Bellevue, Washington in 2004. But they'd had a lot of things going on with that team in that season. But again, St. Thomas Aquinas rises out the top 10. I want to finish with more paying homage to the high school football programs in the country on Big C Sports, because I love football and I love paying homage to the young kids that play it. Number 11, St. Louis, Honolulu, Hawaii. Head coach Cal Lee, they've been doing it a long time. That's a team in St. Louis, Honolulu, Hawaii that snapped Bakersfield's 38-game win streak back in the early 90s, a California state champion. And they lost when they went over to the islands. And I guess sand makes your legs a little bit heavy, Big C. But they've been doing it for a long time. Hawaii's best program. They finished 2018 12-0, a number 7 national ranking. They beat Milani 38-17 in the Division I Open Championship in Hawaii. Number 12, Centennial Corona, California, coached by Matt Logan, another Southern California power. They were 12-1 in 2018, finished number 14 in the national rankings. They lost 48-14 to eventual national champion Mater Dei of Santa Ana in the CIF Southern Section Division I semifinals. Number 13, East Side Catholic out of Semmelweis, Washington, head coached by Dominic Dasty. They were 13-1 in 2018. They beat Odia 31-13 in the Class 3A state championship in Washington State. Number 14, Gonzaga of Washington, D.C., head coached by Randy Trivers. They were 9-3 last year, finished with the number 23 national ranking. They beat DeMatha 46-43 in the WCAC championship. A lot of good football being played in the Great Northeast. Another team coming in from the Northeast. You look at Akron, Hoban. It's Archbishop Hoban out of Akron, Ohio. And again, thoughts and prayers with all the state of Ohio with the tragedies that happened there. But football tends to make things better. At least it gets you something to take your mind off of bad things that happen in our country. Head coach Tim Tyrell. They were 2018, 15-0. They were ranked number 16 nationally. They beat Massillon, Washington, 42-28 in the Division II championship. Washington Massillon Tigers, when they play Canton McKinley, that's oftentimes one of the largest crowds you'll see in a high school football game. Nearly 30,000 almost every year when they play that game. But congratulations, Archbishop Hoban of Akron, Ohio, beat Massillon, Washington, 42-28 last year, Division II championship. Number 16, Lakeland, Florida, coached by Bill Castle, 2018. They were 16-0. Finished number 18 in the national rankings. They beat St. Thomas Aquinas in the 7A state championship in Florida. Number 17, Bishop Gorman, out of Las Vegas, Nevada, the finest program in Nevada. Head coach is Kenny Sanchez. In 2018, they were 11-3. They beat Bishop Minogue of Reno 69-26 in the Class 4A championship in Nevada. And Bishop Gorman, they've played a lot of programs from all over the country, and they don't fear for anyone. I want to take you to number 18, De La Salle, Concord, California. Head coach Justin Allenbaugh. He was part of that national 151-game winning streak, coached by head coach Bob Lattiser, but now he's taken over to lead that mighty De La Salle program. In 2018, the Spartans finished 12-1, final number 9 national ranking. They lost only to the national champion Mater Dei of Santa Ana. The Monarchs were the CIF Open Division champions, and De La Salle would love a chance to get back to that game and try to avenge that loss against a Southern California power. Number 19, Carol City, Miami, coached by Coach Benedict Polite, number 9-3 last year. They were number 12 in the national rankings. They lost to Miami Central 30-21 in the second round of the 6A playoffs. Number 20, Allen, Texas, the $60 million stadium down in Texas. Head coach is Terry Gamble. They finished 2018 14-1. In number 8 national ranking, they lost to Duncanville, Texas, 44-35 in the Class 6A Division I semifinals. And Allen is always a team that's scheduled the top teams they can find around the country. Would love to see them play some of the best from California. We'll finish out with a few more teams. Number 21, DeMatha, Hyattville, Maryland. Head coach is Bill McGregor. They were 2018 8-3. They lost to Gonzaga in the WCAC championship in the East. Number 22, St. Joseph Regional out of Mountville, New Jersey. Head coached by Augie Hoffman. In 2018, they were 10-2. They beat Bergen Catholic 13-10 in the non-public Group 4 championship in the Great Northeast. Number 23, Dutch Fork from Irmo, South Carolina. Head coached by Tom Knotts. They were 2018 13-0. They beat T.L. Hanna 59-20 in the Class 5A championship out of South Carolina. Two more teams, and these are just our thoughts and many of the sports writers around the country, from Cal High Sports to Max Preps to Big C Sports Prep. Everybody has their opinion. Number 24, Marietta, Georgia. Head coached by Richard Morgan. In 2018, they finished only 5-6. They lost 28-26 to East Cotwella in the 7A playoffs in Georgia. You wonder how a 5-6 team gets in there, but it doesn't mean you're not one of the better teams. If you can compete in the playoffs in Georgia, you're one of the top teams in the country. And number 25, I will give it to Northern California, Folsom High School out of the Sacramento area. Head coach is Paul Doherty. They're 2018 14-1. Their only loss, they were shut out to open the season at number 1 Concord de La Salle, but you got to applaud them for taking on that game. They've been the most dominant high school in the Sacramento section over the last decade, replacing the likes of Grant High School and also Elk Grove as they've climbed the ladder in the state of California. And they beat Central Catholic of the San Diego section 21-14 in the CIF Division I 2A state championships. So we bring it to you all on Big C Sports, where the greatest boxers in the history of the boxing universe. We've done that with Big C. We talked to you about Major League Baseball. We talked to you about what it's like to be a fighter and to fight for what you want. I just love these programs that keep fighting for everything they want. And if you fight hard enough, you get it. We talked about all the great college football programs and their fight to be number 1 in the country, or at least fight to win their conference. And then to close out today on Big C Sports, to talk about the top 25 high school preseason football teams in the country, according to Max Preps, Cal High Sports, and Big C Sports Prep. We covered all. It's our opinion. Everybody has an opinion, and we just hope that you'll keep following on Big C Sports. And as we always tell you, you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the iHeartRadio podcast, the number 1 podcast in the country for Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Speaker. You can follow Big C Sports on YouTube. You can follow Big C Sports on television if you have Xfinity Comcast television. And the app I really love is Alexa. If you say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast, you'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear Welcome to the Show. I'll introduce Big C, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate our sponsors for all their support. As we always tell you, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown, and he was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. And as I always ask Big C, what is he looking forward to in the sports universe? I'll tell you that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. We'll always pay attention to it on Big C Sports. You can follow us every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide. You can follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the number 1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number 1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.